Hi everyone, welcome at RaveAct. Today with Joseph Miller, a serial founder and scientist. And as you can see, Ernesto is already super excited for this episode because we were talking about all things, from robotics to his entrepreneurial journey to data, privacy, ownership, to all sorts of crazy stuff. And if you watch this episode, you will see that I was just, I didn't know what to say sometimes. So it's really an exciting episode and super authentic. I love Joe. He's just a great guy. And yeah, enjoy the episode.
WaveAct, the web-free software company that understands what you want.
Hi, man. Thanks for taking the time. It's really a pleasure talking with you again. And yeah, I will just throw the first question at you. And as most of the viewers already can see in the description, you have founded many companies in your life. And the first thing that I'm definitely sure most of us would be curious about is what would you tell your younger self when you were just starting out with your entrepreneurial journey?
My instinct was to answer like, "Don't do it," but that would be a total lie. I've had a great time. It's been a lot of fun. Entrepreneurship is a really interesting, unique, like life trajectory, right? It's a little bit. It's very unique in a sense, like it's very nonlinear, right? So if you're the type of person that really enjoys that sort of linearity to your life, like I do, then it's really the only thing you could do, right? So diving into a new domain is like basically impossible in a normal career trajectory. Whereas in entrepreneurship, it's sort of like that's sort of what you do. You move from one business to another. I've had a board game company and an enterprise software company and a Web3 company, a hedge fund, like all these random things that are seemingly random, but the like backbone of that is sort of a curiosity, a passion to solve problems, um, you know, uh, just trying to do something new, right? Trying to do something new and meaningful and exciting. And I like to say, like, live as many different lives as you can, right? So I would tell myself, my younger self, that you get all of that. That indeed, that is actually true. You do actually get all of that. And then I would probably give myself the warning that, like, so while all of that is the upside, the downsides are very feast and famine, right? Like when things are working, it's sort of when it's rain, it pours type of thing, and that's for the good and the bad. Um, and there's just like, the crises come from anywhere, so there's really no security in that sort of like life trajectory. There's just no security if you're not building upon a stable sort of thing. You're always trying to do something new. It's just a fragile way of existing, really, which makes it exciting, but also that frail. So I'd probably tell myself to, like, have better risk management, decision making when I was younger. I think I could have, like, capitalized on a lot more of the opportunities that I had. But live and learn that way.
Well, sounds to me like there were of course, a lot of ups, but also a lot of downs. Was there a moment where you thought, well, I'm not sure if this is going to work out.
I mean, in like every single company, there are multiple moments like that, and then it's very bipolar, right? It's very like one moment you're like manic, and everything is just exciting and full of opportunity, and it's all working and it's humming along, and then literally just out of nowhere, the next moment or something happens in the global economy that has nothing to do with you. It can change everything. And so, there's a great study. I forget who did it. I think it was like a HBS study that I read a long time ago, that basically followed a bunch of entrepreneurs for 10 years or whatever. And it basically found that the number one predicting factor of success for these companies were the things that didn't happen to them. So it's, in some sense, it's like it's like being the last soldier on the battlefield that you just didn't get shot.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, that has almost nothing to do with you. So most of the danger is like things you don't really actually have a ton of control over. Now, having said that, like you succeed. So if you succeed by sort of surviving in that sense, then the name of the game is to like make decisions that allow you to keep playing. Right? It's like playing poker or something like that. It's like you just got to keep being in the game because you're waiting for opportunities. You're looking for you know, a little break in the window to be able to capitalize on. And if you're not in the game, you won't be able to play. Right? So just that's what I say about this risk management is like really understanding that like that is a big part of just trying to build anything, trying to do something difficult is it's like people make a big part of the grit, totally necessary, but the grit won't matter if you can't play, right? So you got to survive. You got to like live long enough for the opportunities to hit and you know, avoid, and hopefully you get lucky and you can avoid some of these things that, you know, have nothing to do with you.
Yeah, I've seen not sure if it was a study, but I think a couple of entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley or something like that, and if they survived over 10 years, they all have been in some way been successful. You know, like
Right.
it's just persistence and resilience and keeping going.
And survivorship bias. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I think that like the, you know, there's not a single company that has just like worked without those existential moments, right? Um, I mean, Vivint is a in all regards like an unbelievably successful company. It's, you know, we raised our first round in 2019. Great time. You know, the next few years was just amazing. But then you have 2022 and this global macro space. It's a SaaS company, very sensitive to the global macro environment, and like SaaS as a whole sector was really brutalized, right? So you know, you go from these like really highs and feeling like, oh, we've really got something, to like a hard wake up call, like, oh, business is business, and like, you know, there's really no silver bullets to anything. Like you got to block and tackle, you got to execute well, you got to manage your cash flow well, you got to be prepared for these like unforeseen events or changes in trends and in the markets that that you're really sensitive to. And when everything is working, it's really hard to know that, right? It feels like the best place that happens is in the finance space, is in the hedge fund. When you're really like, when you're trading and you're just crushing it and it's like really working well, like you think you have something, right? Like you think, I am a genius, I have figured out like, you know, the secrets to the market. And that's like the bitch about statistics, man, is that you know, there's lots of strings. If you play enough hands, like you'll have lots of strings where it just looks like, you know, you're a god, like you're untouched. Similarly though, the opposite side of that, we're like, man, I'm having an unbelievable run of bad luck, and like you need the balance between being able to say like, oh, when it's going great, you're not as good as you think you are, but when it's bad, you're not as bad as you think you are. And luck plays a big part of this, and you got to be able to reason about it statistically and say like, okay, should I keep going, or do I have something systematically breaking here?
that's a great point. Someone told me, I think a few years ago, the ups are getting higher and the downs are getting lower.
Yeah, some volatility there for you.
But looking at your companies, what was one of the most crushing experiences for you so far? If you want to share that, of course.
Oh man, the most crushing experience. Um, there's so many. um,
We have time.
I mean, I think it's actually not true. Like there's not that many for me. Like there's a lot of these companies like have not worked or have not, you know, succeeded the way I hope they would. But I mean, it's like cliche, but like those failures are, they're like trophies to me, right? Like it's not, it doesn't feel, when you're doing something truly new, when you're really trying to do, even if it's new to you, right? It's not, that doesn't mean new to the whole world. It's just new to you. It's really hard to fail in some sense. Like you can run out of money, the company has to go bankrupt or whatever, but it's like the experience of the whole process is sort of just like a river. It just kind of flows, right? So it's not like there's not really a good or bad type of aspect to like the quote unquote failure or success of things. I would say the hardest thing, like the darkest I have felt about the thing is in finance, where when you're trying to, because like Battery is a systematic FX trading fund. And it truly is soup to nuts autonomous. That was sort of the thing. Like, there had a bunch of like holy grail properties I wanted to build into a hedge fund. One was that it has to have short-term trading, but not like high frequency, not like intrasecond trading. It's not trying to like skim things or anything. It's like it has to have a view, but it has to only hold the trade for a day. It can't trade over the weekend, so you can't like exploit, interest rate changes or whatever. Like, it is truly a noise trading system. It's like, it should be in theory impossible if the market was efficient, but clearly it's not efficient. Otherwise this would be impossible. But there are many, many times when I thought, I've been building this for 4 years, and for the first 2 years, especially, there were many, many times where I thought I got it, and then realized that it like, there's foreknowledge here, or leaked here, data leak here, or whatever. And the whipsaw effect of that is brutal, especially when you have this like haunting feeling that like maybe the markets are efficient, and it's hard to hold conviction, on this kind of roller coaster swing. And I've been riding that roller coaster for years, and that is really, really painful. That can be very painful at sometimes, because you feel really stupid a lot of times. And especially if you're like, this is another thing a lot about, I would say to my younger self, like when you're launching companies, if you're an entrepreneur, like you're sort of arrogantly optimistic. Like it's almost like a necessary but not sufficient condition to succeed as an entrepreneur, is like you kind of got to think you're really special in the face of extremely daunting probabilities that you're going to succeed, right? And so for anybody to go do it, you sort of have to think like, I'm that good, right? Which is very, very arrogant to say. But also you got to be able to sell, right? And so being enthusiastic about what you're trying to do and excited about like the way you see the world and the way you think the world should change, or whatever it is you're trying to do, is a big part of it too. So every Thanksgiving, you go to your in-laws or whatever, and they ask you what you're doing, and you come with the same like fervor and excitement about your latest idea, and then it doesn't work, right? And then you're, oh, I got it, and then it doesn't work. And it's like, for everybody that's not an entrepreneur, that doesn't viscerally understand like why somebody would stick through that, you look super stupid. And also, like, possibly unstable. Like, you kind of look like somebody that is like, oh, do I really want my daughter, with this person or whatever? Like, is this guy going to make it? Fortunately, I've had a lot of support from everybody around me, but like, that is a feeling that is real. Like, everything you look delusional until something works, right? So, so it can be very isolating, it can be very lonely that way. And then it's just a grind, man. It's just like, it's tiring. It's tiring to continually fool yourself, right? There's a great quote, I forget who it is. It was, I think it was a physicist, but it was like it might've been Feynman or somebody, but it was like, the first rule is don't fool yourself. And then the second rule is that you're the easiest to fool. So like, that is a very good principle to live by.
When thinking about that gets me curious. You have to be optimistic, of course. You have to be, as you termed it, flipped it, coined it, arrogant in some way, right? To think that you are superior over all others to make this work, which, of course, there's this thing, superiority complex, basically, that most entrepreneurs have in common, right? From what I've seen so far. And I'm just wondering, when you have multiple companies, after one another, don't you lose that at some point because you get, I wouldn't say more
You fail so many
realistic.
times.
No, more in terms of you understand the likelihood of achievements much
Yeah.
better, you know. Don't that's just my thought a little bit, that you get more
Yeah,
realistic.
I think that like you can like anybody that knows me would not ascribe me like as a humble person. Like it's not one of my strengths, right? um but like there is a like a little, you know, fraction of humility that I think that has been pounded into me. But mostly just because like you fail so much that if you sampled my startup history, it looks like the distribution looks like the normal distribution. It's like, yeah, you have mostly failures, but you have some successes, and that's what the world looks like, right? So it's like you sort of recognize that, yeah, when you're trying to do hard things, you're going to fail at them. If you had a perfect success record, like you're probably not doing hard enough things. Like if things are just a slam dunks all the time, like that's not it's not very hard. So so I think that like putting all of that into perspective just gives you a little bit more of a comfortability with failure, a comfortability with like the probabilities of success. And I think that your mind starts to go less from like, oh, I'm the thing that makes it special, to more like, you know, I have a process that allows me to circumnavigate myself, right? Like I can get around my weaknesses, and I know that I have these weaknesses, and these things have led me to increase my probability of failure in the past. So now I can get around them, right? Like I used to have a very strong disposition to want to do everything myself, and like design and the engineering and the leadership and the everything, right? And it's just a stupid way of behaving. Like one, I'm not the best at all of those things. I'm not the best at really any of those things. And then and two, like it just, you can't do as much. You can't do as much. And so it's like literally just doesn't make sense to do that, to live that way. The only reason you would do that is for an ego. But even that, it doesn't serve your ego because you can't do as much. So it's a little bit silly. But going back to this thing of saying like, you know, like the humility comes in the realization that I think that you have to survive, and a lot of it is just not up to you. And so you can be the greatest guy in the world, but you know, if you're on the front lines charging the beaches, like stray bullets are not have nothing to do with your talent or skill or anything, right? So a lot of it is just luck, and the realization that like you win by playing a lot of hands, right? So you got to just keep playing the game. As soon as you stop playing the game, then you've lost. But as long as you're playing, as long as you're at the table, like you have a chance.
That's a great mission. If I could ask you for one single favor, it would be that you hit subscribe onto this channel, because it helps our channel more than you can imagine. And you know, the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests get. So thank you very much for watching, and let's continue with the episode. That's a great way to put it, yeah. I think there's also this saying, if you look back 1 year and you don't think, oh, like I'm embarrassed what I said, how I expressed myself, you know, all these kind of things, or what I knew, or how I viewed the world, then you are not really growing, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, just let me go one step towards when you spoke about about your companies. The latest venture of yours was Quivr, and basically a social validation protocol, identity, a Web3 project to some extent as well, or huge extent. And I'm just wondering, since it's the last venture that you actively engaged in so far, what were some of your key learnings you got out from that specific project?
Yeah, that's a good one. So I love Quivr. There's a lot of things I really love about this company. Specifically, I thought, well, one, I have to give, you know, kudos to the co-founders, Ray and Vinny. We've built a lot of things together, and it's really fun to build things with people that you've done this before with. And the reason is because the processes you guys want to go through are similar. And so you agree upon how you should chart uncharted territory. Right. And that's a really valuable aspect with your co-founders is like the agreement, not just on, you don't have to agree on like where you are trying to get to, but you should agree on like how you are going to go about getting places. And that's like really, really important. And so like Quivr is an interesting company because we sort of raised the money, the seed round in like the hype of the whole bull market and all of this. And we wanted to do something really big and really difficult. And I would say like that is the biggest thing I've lesson learned is that is actually it was very big and very difficult. And Quivr's about trying to create a home for people's like real identity. Right. So I used to say like, when you go to a bar or you go to a book club or whatever you might go to and you meet new people, how do you engage with them as humans? Like you engage, like you ask them, what's their name and whatever, but then you ask them like, what do they do? What motivates them? Like what, what hobbies, what is it? Like, I want to know what this person's like. And I rarely ask any of the things that are like on a typical social media profile. Right? Like what is on your Instagram is almost, antithetical to like what I'm trying to say. It's like, that is not at all who people are. Like that's part of the problem is that like most social media sites, they're not authentic in any way. That doesn't represent anybody at all. I can see a whole Instagram and be like, I have no idea what this person's like. Right.
Sure.
And it's very different when you're in person. You meet people and it's like authentic and you're like, oh, it's real. It's not so showy. It's not doctored up and all of this stuff. And so we're trying to create like a place where like that identity could exist digitally. And so what we wanted to do is be able to allow people to, get these badges and then authenticate themselves and their passions of those things in just like a non-filtery, it's on your friend's feed kind of way. Just sort of like, hey, I am a fan of, Peloton or a fan of equestrian horse riding. And it's like, and here's like videos that are just like real life camera roll videos of to support that evidence and authenticate those passions. And it becomes like, there's like this kind of dream of all the things that you can get out of that, right? You're like, it becomes the last profile you need, right? It's like your real identity. You marry that up with your professional resume. And it's like, I have a really good idea of what this person's like. Like, I know what this person's about. And that was the dream. That was sort of what we wanted to do is like create a human place for in the digital world, right? A place to represent your humanity in a digital world in an authentic, validated way. That is incredibly big, incredibly audacious, and was incredibly hard. It's obviously it's difficult for lots of reasons. One is that, in the Web3 hype, one of the big narratives was that people want to own their data, they want to own their identity, and that may be true or not, but the adoption rates of not just at Quivr, right, which is a startup that's difficult for anybody to know about, but at any of these types of things, it's just not that great. So it suggests that people like actually don't care that much about their data or their privacy. And indeed, like if you looked at behaviors across social media, that might not be that surprising actually. It's like a thing that we say, but then we don't do, right? And that may or may not be the case. That's just my experience of looking at, the data and trying to understand the space. It seems like that may be the case. And then secondly, it's like, nobody really wants to know their social media type of site like that. It makes total sense. Like, so trying to get people to adopt both a Web3 thing and a new identity solution was maybe a bit a bridge too far. I think that the product was required a lot of like fundamental change to the way people operate on the internet, and that. I think going back, thinking about it, I would be like, well, that is going to take a really long time. Even if you get it right, that's just going to take a long time to affect that kind of change societally. So that's okay. I'll just say this one last thing. The way we went about iterating through the product, though, was glorious. And like I loved, like we started out with like lots of different ideas of how to achieve this, and we sort of iterated like through it, like rolled it out, saw what people thought about it. What did you think about this? We pressure tested it. We fell in love with our ideas, and then spent a week doing something else, and then come back and like, you shit all over your own ideas and you change it. And like I felt like we really pressure tested the way we built the product, and I really love that process. It takes a long time to build product that way, but like every single decision I felt like was validated and driven by the data and driven by our iterations through the product. I was very proud of the way that we went about trying to build the product, even if it like is going to take a long time to get adopted mass market.
Well, you definitely can be, right? Anyone that I've shown a Quivr to, it's especially the front end. It's just if you open the application, it's like wow, like
Yeah.
it's different. It has that wow effect. And what I really liked is when you were mentioning before that adoption rate is one of the major challenges. That just reminds me of uh, everything, or basically that the perception of risk, let's put it that way. When you look at security or even your health and all these kind of things, you know, or you say you don't want a specific things to happen, but you still act against it, just
Yeah.
for the simple reason you don't really see the risk, the thing happening in the future. And it's the same about data ownership, right? You want your privacy because you know that some companies or people might, do something bad with it or sell it or spam you all the way through your life and all that kind of stuff, right? And maybe it's really, as you said, a mindset change that needs to happen, or it's just ingrained in our human behavior. I don't know, but
Yeah, I mean, like you're exactly right. Like data privacy is a big deal, but it's a little bit like eating your vegetables. Like that you got to do that, but or you're gonna have like a lot of problems later on. But people don't want to do it, right? Because it's not like it's not sexy. It doesn't taste good. It's like it's a thing you got to do, and I think that the reason is because people just really haven't felt any pain from the violations of data privacy that they are already undergoing. People's data is constantly shuffling around. I remember when I'm 41. I remember when like the AOL and the first internet, like commercial internets were coming out, and the first credit card payments were like being suggested. People were losing their minds. Like nobody would put their real name on the internet. Nobody was going to put their credit card on the internet. Like that was crazy. And because people were concerned about like their identities being stolen and their credit cards being stolen and everything like that. And now you've sort of worked out so many of those kinks that people like it's all seamless. It just is so convenient and so seamless and so like normalized that people just don't even realize what data is moving around, like from their location to their cell phone numbers and all the stuff, right? Like all of these identifiable things. And also like, it's a little bit of my job to build, inference type systems. And people don't even realize like just because certain things like about you are passed over explicitly in a JSON package, it's like you can infer all of the things. You could link these things together and infer everything about people. Buyer profiles and all of this stuff is like very mature advanced technology. And the issue is that it's been used in such like a subtle way that I think that people don't realize that that their identity is already gone. Like that their digital identity is like everything's already out there. Like the LLMs are already training and using people's addresses and phone numbers as part of the all of this type of stuff. And it's just hasn't hit anybody so painfully directly that they have to change their behavior. But I think that if people see direct manipulation against them using their own data, that could spur different behavior. But it has to be like almost so brazen that I just, it's hard for me to imagine that actually happening. Like it's already happening. Like 23andMe literally sells your DNA.
Hmm.
So you're like, this is all. I mean, if it doesn't, if that's not enough for you to change your behavior, then like what's it gonna take?
Well, that's a great question, right? Just think about these phone calls that some people were getting from scammers already. You know, when your daughter, sister, or whoever is calling you, screaming for help, send
Yeah,
me 5K or whatever, and with their voice. And people know that. I think it's they possibly then still think, well, the likelihood that this happens to me, it's
yeah,
again far away, and that's probably the issue with our human brains, maybe, right? It's the same about everything else. If a war happens on the other end of the world, honestly, you care much less than if it happens in the country next to
of
you.
course.
That's just in our nature, and possibly that's, you know, I don't know, just an overall issue we have to tackle. But
Yeah, I mean, in economics, we would call this a coordination failure, right? Like you have basically a group of people that are all failing to protect each. The group would be better off if we all did a thing, but because individually, like we don't feel the pain, we don't do the thing, and now the group's worse off, right? So it's like if you can, these are the spaces where, like in Europe, you have like all these regulations to try to solve that coordination failure problem. Um, and it's a tough balance because obviously that crushes a lot of innovation there too. So it's a mixed bag, man. But yeah, I think that in general, like people will not change on this topic until they feel like direct pain. And I don't know, like to me, like you look at Instagram and like feed like Instagram is a great example, because the company is just like, I think it's a diabolical thing, and like that feed, the order in which the feed comes in is psychologically damaging. It is like the mental health of children growing up on that is absolutely awful and atrocious, and it's down to a science. And I know the science of it, so it is like literally down like that process. The removal of chronology of the feed was all about this. It was all about being able to push like images in a particular order because you can prime people, and you can do things. You can create like induce feelings for the ad that is eventually coming, or for the opportunity that's eventually coming. So it is not just like, hey, I want to get an ad in front of a lot of eyeballs that are interested in going on vacation. It's that I want to make sure this person feels FOMO of all their friends that have been on vacation or other things, and then deliver the ad, right? Like that is manipulative,
that's
and it's
crazy.
dangerous, and it's really dangerous, and that is a form of people using your data against you. That is a form of of data privacy violations. I think it is not legally a form of that, but like that is a real way in which people are being manipulated, and people's mental health is suffering from it, and still nobody cares, right? Like they would rather like doom scroll all day long. So
Yeah,
I think
it's
it's like
also
I
on
think it's a really
purpose, right?
dangerous, trend that we have to deal with.
Wow. So I didn't know that they actually also, adapt the post around it. That sounds just crazy to me. But looking at that, where do you think this all that might lead us to? Like, what's the consequence? Could be the
Well,
consequence.
I think so. I think that you'll probably end up getting some sort of regulation against social media and things like this because of the mental health impacts that it's having, and like these findings are pretty conclusive as they're coming out now. But like that will grow to a fever pitch. You're looking at a generation that has grown up on that, right? And like high school, I don't think was easy for anybody, but it's like it is. When you grow up under that sort of scrutiny and that sort of like sensitivity and that sort of like triggering feelings, right? Like the internet is like, you go on like a comment feed, it's awful. Like people are
Don't do
awful.
it. Yeah.
And it's crazy because like you go to a bar, or you go to a restaurant, or you go to whatever, you go to out to social places, and people are not that way. it's like people just turn like, or is there a selection bias to it or whatever? But like people are mean on the internet because they're anonymous, and in real life, people are not like people are more restrained than that, right? People are nicer than this in general, not everybody, but um, and I think that like you put all of that on teenagers growing up and trying to sort out who they are, and there's already a period of time in every adolescent that there's like we're sensitive to feedback during that time, social feedback. That's like part of our evolution, and that's just I think it's like a very damaging like manipulation of that process. And so I do think that you'll end up seeing like a eventual like boiling over of that topic. But I think in general, like where AI is going and all of this stuff is I think it's away from this sort of like social media feed screen, like feeding anyways. Like at some point, this is not that exciting. And people do wake up to the idea that like, this is not what real life is. Like these people are not that happy. Like that, like life is not like, I am not uniquely unfortunate or something. Right. Like people will find balance that way. And, and I think that they're not as interesting at that point. And then also, like, I think that there will be different ways to target and advertise to people. And then you got to think, like, ultimately, like, I just gave a lecture about AI and labor up at Yale, actually, and to the economics program. And, like, people are debating a lot about how AI and robotics is going to be changing the labor force. But it's certain that, like, it is going to be disrupted. The question is, okay, hey, we've had a lot of technological disruptions over the time. Like, we don't need to be Luddites about this or whatever. But you have to look across and say, well, what is different about this time that looks more like times in the past? Like, people use the example of like the spinning jenny or the textile industry removing, and then those people go get other jobs. But you're like, yeah, they went and got other jobs, or the steel manufacturing, or steam engines and all of that, and like how that was a big boom for the economy and such because it created more jobs. What do you think is going to happen here when labor is the thing at contention, not a particular job where you can have flow into other places? All jobs are reducing like there is nowhere else to go. What are you going to retrain them into? The place that you would retrain them is also using robotics, right? So like all at once, I think this is going to happen. Not really a doomsayer about it. I think it's a very positive thing, actually. I think it will move us, advance us into the future. But the population as is it will be shocking for a generation or two. And yeah, and so I think that like, but then you think, well, what is the world like in a world where labor is manufactured? Labor, not a product that a robot does. Labor itself is manufactured. People are going to have a lot more time on their hands. And I think that's overall a good thing. I think you talk about how that can be sustainable or whatever, but I think that when people aren't having to spend half their life working all the time or so many hours or whatever, what are they going to do? Like, I think going into digital worlds, games, like entertainment, travel, I think these things become more and more important. And then I think also like the marrying that digital world with the physical world so that it's not just like, hey, like I can actually go out in the world now. I have time, I have space, I have capital to be able to go out and experience things and touch things and feel things and smell things and stuff like that. I think people will do a lot more of that kind of stuff. And so I think social media and this kind of stuff is like way less interesting in that sort of world.
Oh, Ernesto, what do you have here? As you know, Ernesto is our chief meme officer at our company Wayfact. And yeah, we just launched a Web3 card game for kids, 2 to 5 players plus 10 years old. And it's all about Web3, the risks, the opportunities, the challenges. And basically, you play this card game and have to collect Ernesto. Like how he's eating french fries, popcorn, sitting in a bucket, these kind of things. So it's really just a super playful way of engaging with the space and actually understanding how it works. So I would really appreciate if you check it out. Of course, we earn some money with that, but every cent, every dollar goes directly towards the free Web3 workshops we do for children, We just had one in Bangkok in November. So I hope you like it. And if you have some feedback, please leave it below. Well, sounds like a great world to live in if it works out from a political standpoint, right? But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think that the world will get better. Like, if it got worse, people will. I mean, and there are times in history where life got worse, right? Like, people kind of take it for granted that like life always gets better, and you're like, no, it doesn't. Like, there's plenty of times in history where like the quality of life got worse for long periods of time. And that may be the case, but then eventually it does get better, because when things get worse, humans don't want things to be worse. They want things to be better. So they like do things that make life better overall. And that's why you have progress in the long run. So I think it's just, you have to have a longer term perspective about all of this stuff. Like, in 1,000 years, life will be much better. It will probably be like completely different in terms of, AI, robotics, and all of this stuff will be integrated into us. We'll probably be another species type of thing, that kind of stuff. But it will be better. Like, progress will move forward if we don't nuke each other.
yeah.
Or Eliezer is not right, and the robots don't just kill us all. So, there's
Let's
that
hope
too.
so. Yeah. Well, speaking of data, let's go a little bit in the past. We talked a lot about the future now. I just want to avoid that people get like, oh my gosh, like. But you worked with Ray Dalio in the past, right, at Bridgewater, and many people know his public persona, and of course you can't go into details. Totally acknowledge that, but I would love to understand a little bit, like, how was it working there? Like, what were your experience, and yeah, what did you learn?
Yeah, I mean, so overall, like, there's a book out now, so a lot of this is like public stuff, and I think the book is like all good pieces of entertainment, embellished a lot, right? But I think that my experience in Bridgewater was great. Like, I learned, in some sense, how to structure my thinking. And it's kind of a weird thing to say, but I feel like, I came from Bridgewater. I got recruited while I was in my PhD program, and I did a lot of stuff in my PhD program. Like, I had a weird dissertation that was like it was like 2 parts. One part was on nuclear fusion, another part was on cancer research. Like, I did I invented all kinds of weird stuff. Like, I had an NSF grant, and so I had a lot of freedom to do what I wanted to do there. I worked in neurosurgery for a while. I did like a bunch of random stuff, and I think, and I was always able to like go into a field and innovate. And but it was, I think, prior to Bridgewater, it was like a cloud. Like, my thinking was more like cloud shaped, if you will. It was just like, if I try to draw the connections between things, it was like very abstract and like a colorful cloud. And after Bridgewater, like, it's sort of like I was able to like clear fog, and I can like learn how to like break down my thinking and structure it so that I could synthesize my thoughts better, and evaluate risk better, frankly. Because when it's a cloud, it's like a lot of vibe, right? It's a lot of like, oh, I think this is innovative, right? But then you can't really think about, like, one, how to execute it is like a kind of a random walk if you don't have a good structure. Two, you can't really evaluate the risk. And the most important thing, which I learned from Ray specifically, is that I can't evaluate why I got it wrong. And so the most important thing about systematic thinking is that when you build a system that is like, I am going to do X, Y, Z, it's like the scientific method. That is why we do it, is so that I have a hard structure that has lots of control variables and everything. And I have a hard process in which I'm going through, so that when I see the outcome, I can compare it to my expectation, and the difference becomes quantifiable against the process that I just ran. And if you do not have systematic thinking, like, what the hell are you doing? You're just doing random things. And you can't learn as fast, because you won't be able to identify what would you change, right? why'd you get it wrong? Like, I have no idea. I just did a bunch of stuff. You're like, yeah, it's not good. It's not good enough. So what I learned from Bridgewater was like, one, how to hold a high bar on rigorous thinking, and two was how to be a rigorous thinker myself. Um, and working with Ray was like, I mean, it was a real joy and pleasure. It was like with everybody there, everybody, there was a definite type that comes out of Bridgewater, and it's a type that I appreciate enormously. It is a hard place to work. It is challenging. It's not for everybody, as they say, blah blah blah. But like for people that want to be the best that they can actually be, it's like an iron sharpens iron thing. Like you got to cut out the fluff. You got to cut out the fluff. Like it's a hard place. If I do something wrong, you just need somebody to say explicitly, you got this wrong. This is what's wrong. And if you could just get past that emotional reaction that you would have, like when people tell you that your thinking is bad, you can get on with the work of making your thinking better. And it's just a really rich place to work. It's a really that is like I will forever be grateful about learning that skill. It has helped me enormously. And then Ray specifically, I mean, I did get the pleasure of being able to work directly with Ray. And I love Ray because Ray's like he is like his public persona is actually his persona. That is who he is. He's not two characters, which I think, for better or worse, is like a extremely admirable attribute about somebody. He is incredibly systematic, and so he is actually that way. And it can come across, I think, kind of robotic and a little bit cold, but it's not. It's disciplined, right? It's rigorous. It's transparent, because that's the other thing too about systematic thinking is if you claim that you want to be transparent, you have to be a systematic thinker, because otherwise, what are you communicating? Like, how do you communicate a non-systematic idea of like what your intentions are if you can't be clear about like what are the variables that you're considering, how are you thinking about them, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I think people think that they are being transparent by telling people their vibes and shit, but you're like, that's not transparency. Like, transparency is about telling me how you came to the decisions that you came to. What are the things you consider? Like, how do you think it's all connected? Like, what are your motivations? All of that stuff has to be part of transparency, and it requires rigorous thinking. So yeah, so I really enjoyed it. I had a great time there. I also got to work with Dave Ferrucci there, who had a big impact on the way I think about AI and the way I think about knowledge representation, and sort of like the old semantic reasoning techniques that I think fell out of vogue have suddenly become like so important as people realize that you can't just like throw more data at the problem and get better results. It's like actually less data, more semantic reasoning gets you better results, right? And so I think like I'm excited about the period that we're in with AI for exactly that reason. Like all of those techniques are coming back up, married with the new embedding models and this kind of neural networks and this kind of deep learning stuff, and you bringing these two together and you're like, this is actually probably going to blow our minds, and like there's gonna be a lot of exciting stuff. And I got to get some foundational learning from both Ray, not on AI from Ray, but just thinking and epistemology and that kind of stuff from Ray, and AI from Ferrucci. I was pretty blessed.
That's awesome. Is there something you are most excited about? Like something that you would love
I am
to
most
see?
excited about AI robotics. I know I just painted a doom story about it, but so the thing that people I think do not write about or talk about enough is like, if you think about what last year the GPT came out and it kind of blew away people that were like, oh crap, like if you just stacked more transformers, like you get you get this magic to come out. Like that was pretty surprising to me. Like I didn't think that was actually going to happen, and so that was pretty shocking. But when you really like tear it back, you're like, what is this thing good for? This thing is really good at translating. So English to Spanish, pretty good, right? But also like English to code, English to mathematics, English to Python, right? And And then I think more importantly, you're getting to a space where you're like English to computational language, right? This is the Wolfram Alpha type of stuff, or Stephen Wolfram type stuff. But then you go from computational language to robotic language, and there's a ton of great work being done at Berkeley and MIT and Carnegie Mellon and other places around how to teach robot. Actually, Elon's robot is based off these principles as well, but how to teach robots not from like codifying knowledge inside of them or procedure, but from giving them a ability to see or hear other things, and then build the robotics that can do those things. And that is like, you have this unbelievable translation engine that could do that. And then if you separately think about like, okay, well, what have robotics been up to? Like Boston Dynamics has basically been doing the same sort of like versatility improvements to robots. So they have like now degrees of freedom of motion in physical space. You have degrees of freedom of thinking in embedding space or latent space. You're going to bring these two things together. And like, I think we were probably 5 years or so away from general purpose robots that change the economy dramatically. You don't need a robot. Right now, you need a robot to wash the dishes. That can only wash dishes. It can't go change your tire. That makes robots very expensive. Just economically, that's not a practical way to, build robotics unless you're a giant manufacturing company. But if you have a general purpose robot, the same robot that washes your dishes can go change your tire, can go mow the lawn, can go fold the laundry. Like, this is wild. Like, that will drive the price of robots, general purpose robots, to the floor. And it's scary only in the sense that what you're doing there is manufacturing not a product, which is currently everything in the world that is manufactured is a product. You manufacture a solution or a service or whatever. This is the manufacture of labor. Mm-hmm. So if you think about like the Cobb Douglas, like I'm trying to make production and I have capital and I have labor to substitute. This is like, I only need labor now. Or rather, I only need capital, and it removes my labor. Like, I don't need labor because my capital can do my labor. And so it's a complete hard substitution. And that is a wild, wild world that we're about to go into. And so I think, like, the writing's on the wall. You look at the labor market is unbelievably tight. You can't get fast food workers. You can't get construction workers. You can't get transport drivers. Also, most of those blue collar type of jobs are worked in the United States anyways by the boomer population that's about to retire. Like, who's going to drive the trucks? Who's going to go do the welding? Like, it's a perfect storm. You have no labor supply, and you have an opportunity to build cheap general purpose robots. Like, that won't unionize on you. That's pretty good. Like, you're about to have a convolution over the next 5 to 10 years that is going to fundamentally change labor, and I think permanently.
Crazy, because people are saying this about robots for quite some time, right? And it absolutely makes sense, right? Everyone has seen those crazy robots from Boston Dynamics and so on.
Yeah.
But 5 years? Really?
Yeah, 5 to 10 years, I think. Yeah, because the main problem is the programming of the robot's procedures. And I'm saying the GPT advancements are allowing you to, at the rate of improvements of these types of systems, you are able to translate natural language into computational language that powers the robot. And I think 5 to 10 years, you will probably have a general purpose robot that you could just speak to it and show it how to wash the dishes, and now it doesn't need to be programmed to wash the dishes. It could you just taught it like you would teach a child, right? Alan Turing, I know we gotta go, but Alan Turing had a great quote. He only wrote a few papers, actually. One of the papers, and so this was at a time when like expert systems in the 80s were like super popular, 70s, stuff like that. But the concept of an expert system goes way back, right? And so Alan Turing had this whole concept or whole discussion on expert systems, and he's like, instead of building an AI system, or you can call it that, but instead of building a thinking machine that is trained like an expert, maybe you should build a thinking machine that's trained like a child, and then you raise the child to be an expert. That is more true than any other prophecy in AI right there. It's like, that's what's going to happen. You don't train expert systems. You train children and then you teach them to learn, and then they become experts.
Well, thinking about this, I can see a whole industry emerging, just of second-hand robots that have been taught certain kind of things, and
Yeah.
that's if that happens, that's really wild.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a company or a research project happening, I think also at Berkeley, that is training robots on how to solve real life problems. Actually, NVIDIA's doing it. It's training robots how to solve real life problems from simulations. Like they're not even having to do the problems in real life. They solve the problem in simulation world, and then they have the ability to solve it here. Like that is full blown Matrix style, right? So it's very exciting. And I'm saying like this is happening all within the last year. So you're like, dude, you're hitting like the thing about exponential curves is that it's not, humans think linearly. So by the time you realize you're on an exponential curve, it's over. So things you think like are 5 years away are probably here in 2 years. So I'm probably underestimating my time, if anything, saying 5 to 10 years. But I think that just because manufacturing plants of robots take time to stand up, like probably roughly about 5 years, that's basically what I think is happening. I think that and if you look at like manufacturing trends, China is invested more into general purpose robots over the last couple of years into manufacturing plants. United States, Japan, and in Europe as well. But like all of that is happening. Like all of a sudden, there's a bunch of plants spinning up to build general purpose robots, and it's probably because they know the software, the tech is coming by the time these manufacturing plants could get stood up. So pretty good signal, I think.
Wow. Okay. I'm a little bit stunned to speak. I always thought robots are far away. I see all these videos, but I just deleted it from my radar a little bit, to be honest, right? Because it was just too obvious for me that we're far away from everything like that you see in the movies, actual general purpose robot. But I have one last question for you, Joe, if that's okay. And
Sure.
we have talked about a lot of super interesting topics today, but are there 3 things that you would like the audience to remember?
So if you're an entrepreneur, I don't know if I can come up with 3 things, but if you're an entrepreneur, I would say the most important principle I am myself feeling and meditating on is like is the grit concept. It's just keep going. There's a great quote, I think it was by, I don't know who it was, another physicist, somebody, but it was like, I think it might have been Einstein, but it was like it's not that I see further, it's just that I stick with the problems longer, right? And that's a superpower. It's like you don't need to be a genius. Like you need to stick with the problem. You will by the time you solve it, right? It takes a long time to solve any sufficiently difficult problem. Then you look like a genius. But like it is all like retroactive or retrospective, like that way. It is grit that makes geniuses, right? So just sticking with problems, believing in it, just keeping it going, like that is by far and away the most important aspect to me right now. 2 would be, I would say like doing like my Quivr reflections would be things take a long time. Everybody knows that anyways. Like things just tend to take much longer than you think that they will anyways. And even I think a great idea, like I think Quivr is a really great idea. The adoption rate is going to be slow because the change that you're requiring of people is large. And so it doesn't mean that it's like, so you got to understand, are you working on a problem like that? If you're working on a problem like that, it's going to take a long time. And you have to consider that as a business standpoint, like, do you have the capital for it? Like, what are the milestones you could break down that you could then fund it that way, especially going into the next 5 years where I think venture capital is going to be writing much smaller checks in a higher interest rate environment. The model just doesn't really work as well for venture. Venture actually in general is not that great, but as an asset class, but and from a risk adjusted perspective, but it's going to be much harder. So the checks are going to be smaller. So how are you going to do projects that take longer? Like you're going to need to get to profitability faster. You're going to need to show progress faster. That means smaller milestones, more deterministic, development paths, et cetera. So I think that's a really important thing over the next 5 years too. And then third, I just say I think building companies is extremely difficult. Everybody knows that. It is also a ginormous privilege. It is an incredible privilege to be able to work in tech and entrepreneurship and be able to chase kind of crazy ideas. And so I think just remaining grateful, even though we went through, the last 2 years have been pretty brutal for a lot of entrepreneurs, but it is really, I think just reminding ourselves to be grateful that this is really cool work. We get to work on really neat things. We get to affect change in a really meaningful way. And that'll keep you motivated.
Cool stuff. Hey, thanks, mate, really, for your time. It means
brother.
a lot. And
Of course.
yeah,
Good talking.
likewise.
All right, buddy. I'll see you soon.
I hope you liked the episode. I did for sure. I think my shocked face sometimes was really difficult to not see. And yeah, please leave your feedback in the video below, basically in the comment section. Hit subscribe, engage with the video, anything helps. Thank you very much. And yeah, I'm still baffled, if that's the right word.
WaveAct, the web-free software company that understands what you want.